name is Fran Casey. I'm the Director of Community Relations here at DePaul University, and I want to welcome all of you to our program tonight. We're thrilled that you are here, and I know you're here to hear Bob Segal, which we all are. Just a word for some of you who may not have joined us before about the research initiative. The Lincoln Park Community Research Initiative was founded during DePaul's centennial year, 1998 and 1999. And it was founded because the university, was looking for a way to come together with the Lincoln Park community to do something positive together. And what we decided was that we had all shared a history for 100 years, at that point 100 years, now we're 118 years in this wonderful neighborhood. So we came together and we decided that we would build a historical collection of Lincoln Park history in the Richardson Library, the Special Collections Department. And to highlight the fact that we wanted to collect our history, we have programs twice a year, programs like tonight, where we focus on some aspect of Lincoln Park. This is our 34th program. And we are delighted that for our 34th program, we are welcoming Bob Segal. And I will tell you just a little bit about Bob Segal. He has lived in Lincoln Park for the past 36 years, as many of you already know. His day job is as a management consultant, but his passion is photography. The focus of his photography is architecture and urban photography. He began his passion for photography as an 8-year-old little kid when he got, as a birthday present, a darkroom kit. Now, who would ever think of getting a darkroom kit for an 8-year-old, but he did. He has collected over 110 photographs from the area bounded by North Avenue, Belden, Lincoln, North Avenue, Halsted, Lincoln, and the former Ogden Avenue. His collection includes photographs of churches and schools and hospitals and taverns and social clubs and you name it. Transportation, I believe, also. He will fill that in for you. So without further ado, I would like you to join me in welcoming Bob Segal.
Thank you very much, Fran, and it's great to see so many friends and neighbors and history buffs in the same room. By the way, those groups are not mutually exclusive. So I wanted to, I do have the proverbial 10 pounds of stuff crammed into a 3-pound bag here, so I do have to move quickly through all the material today. But I did want to do a few thank yous. So first, thank you to DePaul for hosting us. Thank you to Fran and the Lincoln Park Community Research Initiative for selecting my project as a spring event. Thank you to Lincoln Central Association, and particularly Kenneth Dotson, their president, for encouragement throughout the whole project. You know, if you live near or in or anywhere near Lincoln Central, which I'll talk about in a while, we've got our membership table out there, so we'll plug Lincoln Central. And thank you to Bridgeview Bank for being one of our sponsors. So, and thank you to the librarians at the Special Collections and Archives. A number of photographs are from there. They helped a lot. And of course, the librarians at the Chicago History Museum. A number of photographs from there and other places. A couple of housekeeping issues. So we've got about an hour to speed read through everything here. After which we will have, I'm dreading it, but a half hour of discussion. So if you've got questions or comments or corrections, save them for the half hour afterwards. So I know some people are going to ask, like, well, where are copies of the presentation? Well, we don't have copies of the presentation, time, money, but also there's copyright issues and other things. However, that said, if you have some burning desire for, one of these photos or where you get it, come see me afterwards. Or the very last slide, I'll put up my contact information. So if you've got a question about this and don't get answered, you can email me and those sorts of things. And I think that's it. So without further ado, let's jump into this. So this is, roughly Lincoln Park area. Lincoln Park originally, there we go. All right, this is the Lincoln Park area. Originally Lincoln Park was kind of a marshy mix of open meadow and as well as some forest before the city was formed. When the city was founded in 1833, North Avenue was called North Avenue for a reason. It was the northern border of the city. There wasn't that much north of North Avenue. There's some Indian encampments along Green Bay Trail, on the Fullerton Halstead, for example. But people moved here. The city grew rapidly, and this area, Lincoln Park, became heavily German around the mid-1800s to 1900s, and that will factor into a lot of what I talk about. A lot of Germans, as a matter of fact, a lot of farms in Lincoln Park, they actually called it the cabbage patch, because there's a lot of cabbage. A lot of Germans came to the United States because of the failed revolution of 1848, when a lot of Germans were fighting for liberal democracy, and they lost, and so they looked for better economic future, better political future, and they settled everywhere from Wisconsin down to Texas. And by 1860, they were 20% of the Chicago population. So anyway, let me tell you a little bit about how this project started. As Fran mentioned, the Lincoln Central Association is kind of the boundaries I use. About a year or two ago, I joined the board of Lincoln Central Association. I mentioned to Kenneth, our president, I said, boy, it'd be kind of fun to put on our website. I could maybe find an old picture, and these are the boundaries, by the way. Fran mentioned there's North Avenue there, Halstead. We diagonal down to Lincoln, and many of you probably know, but I don't know if everybody knows, that Ogden Avenue used to go through, no longer. But when it did, it was our boundary, it still is. And so I said, maybe I can find an old photograph within that narrow boundary. And I found one, and it was kind of hard, just look it online, type in and search words. I found a second, and a third, maybe a fourth, but then it got really tough. But then I really dug in and started looking. And then I went here to DePaul, I went to the History Museum, I started going into private collections, I started asking around, and next thing you know, I got the measles. So I did find a lot of photographs, so we're going to go through a lot of things. So, this isn't a whole look at all of Lincoln Park, it's at a part of Lincoln Park, and that's why we call it a neighborhood history. But I think there's a real benefit because I really had to dig deep and really find the history of something. If I look at all of Lincoln Park, you'd see the same stuff you always see, right? Here's the park before and after. So we're going to look at some things that I'm sure no one here, or very few people here, have seen a lot of the things that are going to be on here. So it's going to be fun. Okay. So, as Fran mentioned, I'm going to talk about public transportation and utilities. I think it is just the coolest thing that I'm presenting this on the 21st anniversary of this, really not the CTA, but the elevated train. And I know my friend Teresa rode the train. Anybody else ride the history train? I don't know. Okay. Ian did, that's right. Anybody else? So we have 2 people who rode the trains around today, the historic trains. So churches, we look at hospitals and welfare institutions, schools. I don't know, does anybody know that North Avenue was called the German Broadway? Okay, well, we'll tell you why. Taverns, social clubs played an important role back in the turn of the previous 2 centuries. Just a few street scenes, nothing major. And then probably the most controversial thing in our history is urban blight and renewal. That's going to bring us much closer to the present. We're talking 1960s, not 1860s there. And then just a couple of last spots. All right, well, let's jump into this with, given everything. So we're going to look at various modes of public transportation. The first one here is what was called an omnibus. It was an idea borrowed from New York City and then spread to other cities. Before this, everybody, either walked or they rode horses. There was no public transportation. And so it started really downtown, and a couple operators there. One of the first operators, by the way, companies still exist. You probably use them. Continental Airport Express, right? The buses to the airport. They were one of the first omnibus companies. Well, I think it's called Del Express. And so they were used downtown mostly to bring people from the train stations, the stockyards, or the downtown hotels. And but eventually they spread up north into our area, and the North Chicago Railway Company was formed. They had originally just went over the muddy roads, and it was bumpy, and nothing was really paved. Then somebody decided, well, let's put some planks of wood down, which was barely an improvement. But then somebody had the bright idea to put down some rails, and that was a better idea. And then it spread up north to our area. So there were lines on Center Street, right? Everybody knows where Center Street is, right?
No, no.
There you go. Armitage Avenue used to be called Center Street. There was a loop on Racine, Garfield, and Dickens that kind of went around. Another one, Webster, Racine, and Fullerton, and there was an omnibus line in Clybourne. So what you would do is you'd ride, in the morning, you'd ride east, just like any commuter today. You'd ride east to like Clybourne or Clark Street, change for another omnibus, and go downtown to work. Of course, there were some problems with omnibuses, namely that you had horses pulling them. Horses got sick, you had to feed them, something came out the other end. As a matter of fact, the ASPCA, the American Society for Professional Cruelty to Animals, was formed, everybody thinks does take care of dogs and cats. No, it was formed because of all the problems people had with horses. So, so that's where that comes from. The thing about, there was even a stable on Larrabee, just north of Armitage, where they kept, they had a lot of stables, but there was one on Larrabee, north of Armitage, where they kept the carriages and the horses when they weren't being used. You probably can't see this, but on the front there's a sign here, and I zoomed in, and the first word right there is Tante, if I'm saying that right, which is German for today. So I told you it was a German neighborhood, so it's nice, and it talks about a picnic. And where did they say it was? The picnic was in Fritz's Grove. I have no idea where Fritz's Grove was. Turns out it's the corner of, or where Clybourne and Armitage or Center Street would hit today. There's a place called Fritz's Grove there, and a picnic there. I advertised it on the. All right, so they had problems with horse-drawn carriages, and there was a new technology around, and so let's take a look at that. That doesn't look like new technology. Well, this is going to be what the rest of the presentation is going to look like. This is a little bit outside of Lincoln Central area. That's Jonquil Park. Right there, right there, Jonquil Park. So it's at Lincoln and right where we're looking northwest. And so if you can imagine a little bit later, or a little bit earlier, it looked like this.
Wow.
And so what this is believe it or not, everybody thinks it's a trolley car, right? No, it's a cable car. Chicago had the biggest cable car network in the country. Everybody thinks it's San Francisco. San Francisco had 4 little lines. And we said, hey, we got this problem with horses here, let's try cable cars. Well, it was a pretty short-lived idea. Because we're going to get into trolleys in just a second. There were 4 companies that were formed. They ran into some problems because if you wanted to run, just like with the omnibuses, if you wanted to run a cable car line, you had to get not only permission from the alderman, Michelle's here somewhere, right? But you also had to get permission from everybody's house you passed.
Good luck.
So, how do you get permission from the alderman? Not today, Michelle, don't worry, but how would you get permission from your alderman and all these people? Yes. So it took a while because they had to figure out how to get the wheels greased, so to speak. So the relevant line, there were lines downtown. The relevant line for us was on Lincoln Avenue. And you can see that this is in fact Lincoln Avenue, right, the Lincoln Avenue line. I had to figure out, where exactly was this photograph located? It's the problem I had with a lot of the photographs. I kind of knew maybe what corner it was on, but which direction was it facing? Well, there's over here somewhere, there's an address, 515. That kind of helped, but I had to convert it because in 1908 they changed all the addresses. But I still didn't know. I assumed it was Lincoln Avenue, but what really helped is if you look at the back here and you zoom in, it's Schnabel's. And I looked up Schnabel's, and it turns out Schnabel's Sample Room was a very high-end tavern. And it mentioned it happened to be on the northwest corner of Lincoln and Wrightwood. Aha! So now I knew where the photograph was, and that's how I got the site the one before it. So cable cars worked well for a while, but there's a problem with a cable car. You've got to run a cable, and it's got to go for miles. And cable's great. They don't do that well in the winter either. And as a matter of fact, the powerhouse that pulled the cable was right in the back of this building. So Jonquil Park actually used to be the power plant that ran the Lincoln Park cable system. And if you go to the south end across the street, you can still see the electrical substation that's still there. All right, so we had problems with horses, we had problems with cable cars, and then some.
Electric,
Yeah, it was well, it's powered by I think some diesel generators. So electric's coming up later. Yeah, so electric's coming up now. So this is right by the the fire station on Armitage and Larrabee today. And we're going to make another transition. Keep your eyes on this building right there, just so you can follow the transition. But in the 1940s, it looked like that. And you can see that same building's there, right? The other thing that we'll talk about later on is, hey, there's a tavern right there. How about that? Just about every picture I have, there's a tavern in it. One thing I learned from looking at old photographs of Chicago is, back in the day, we had a lot more taverns and we had a lot more churches. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So trolleys, and you can see the overhead lines up here, right? Those aren't birds, those are connectors, because you've got the overhead lines going that way and that way. So we have trolley cars, and the trolley cars had some problems, and there were 4 different lines again. And the city eventually passed the unification ordinance of 1913, which said that we should only have one company running them, and that was called Chicago Surface Lines, CSL. We had, by 1914, Chicago had the largest electric street railway system in the world, the longest one-way fare ride, the longest average ride, and the most liberal transfer policies between trolleys of any city in the world. There were trolley lines throughout Chicago for many, many years. This one on Armitage ran until 1951. But trolley cars had their day. They were kind of clunky, kind of small and crowded. And so let's take a look at, before we get out of trolley cars, we're going to take a look at Halsted Street. This is the 1900 block, my block. And if you go back till 1938, there's a Halsted Street trolley. Now, one other thing you'll notice from that is, well, that Halsted Street lasted until 1954, so a few years later, but talks about Langer's Market right there. Langer's Market was just up the street. It's in Veracruz. So yeah, Langer's was here for a while. So this is the Halsted Street trolley. And I just happened to find Carl Sandburg owned called the Halsted Streetcar. And I like the fact that he's talking about a cartoonist. There's some really interesting faces you'll find there. And he talks about, you should draw them. You should draw like a pig sticker in the corner. What's he mean by that? Yeah, some of you worked in the stockyards, right? And then he talks about, some factory girl, and so not a very pleasant thought, but he's just talking about how tough life was, and You know, you think your commute's bad, and you look at everybody's kind of like down your commute home. Well, I guess Sandberg was seeing the same thing when he was talking. So trolley cars had some issues though, a lot of breakdowns, a lot of maintenance and everything. Almost at the same corner, just looking a different direction. This is Halstead and Armitage today, or a few months ago when I was taking pictures. And this is what it looked like if you went back to 1950s. Yeah, so you've got a streetcar. So notice this is called a PCC streetcar. It's more like a bus. So it's more modern, there's more space, it's more efficient, easier to keep. But the other thing you'll notice here is that this is also the beginning of a change. Because in the 1920s, automobiles became very popular, so public transportation, the use of it began to decline. And so the Chicago surface lines was trying to balance still using trolleys. They would use trolleys where they had heavy routes, streetcars where they had the heavy routes they used. So right here, like Halstead was a heavy route. Trolley cars where they had medium routes, and they were beginning to introduce diesel buses on light routes. And the other thing I wanted to notice here is that, take a look over here, it says Southern Fried Chicken, and if you look closely, it says the Center Cafe. It's the Center Cafe, as we talked about, because it's on Armitage, and Armitage used to be called Center Street. So that's why the Center Cafe is there. All right, so finally the city became, the Chicago surface lines went bankrupt. They had a lot of problems because, as I mentioned, people were using automobiles now. They also had problems because all the traffic would just slow to a halt with all the, cars and the trolleys and everything. But the real killer was, well, let's take a look at this next one. So this picture is at Armitage and Lincoln. So you can see the Point condominiums there. We're looking north. And if we look into the 1960s, you'll see this looks a little bit different. So empty lots. There's no Point condominiums. It looks like there's a veterinary clinic. And probably somebody noticed, hey, what's this big building there? Yeah, that's old Augustana Hospital, which I'll talk about later on in the hospital section. But you see here's a typical diesel bus. It's an older version, but the city eventually realized that it was really a lot smarter to use diesel. It was cheap. It was efficient to have one type of bus, not a bus and a trolley. But the real killer was the snowstorm of 1967. All the trolleys got stuck because the cars got stuck and the trolleys were fixed to the overhead lines and they couldn't get around them. Whereas if you had a bus, they could have steered around them, but the trolley couldn't go around them. All right, this next one I love. So we're now going to transition to talking about the elevated. Again, 125th anniversary today. Yay!
Yay!
So, not the street transportation, but elevated. Take a look at this, trees on the right and some empty parking lots, a few buildings on the left. This is what it looked like in the 1900s. Yeah. Hey, there's a lot of people who lived here. Lincoln Park hit its population peak in 1950 at about 102,000. Today we're down by about a third. So there's a lot fewer people who live here. The first L was in 1892 or so. So that would be 125 years, roughly. Armitage, they financed the Northwestern elevated line up to our area in 1899. They had like 5 years to get it up and running, and it was about to run out. It was like the day they had to have a train run or their license was going to be up. And they weren't really finished yet. The city declared it was unsafe to run the train. Management said, we got to run the train. There was a police blockade. They went around the police blockade. They arrested the crew. And then management took it over, went around the police blockade, said, we ran it, we're done, until they took their license. Went all the way up to Armitage by 1900, and they built the Brown Line in 1907, and by 1924 they united all the lines into, just like the street transportation, into the went to one company, then merged those two companies. There's what it looks like from the air. So again, get that idea of what a really crowded area we lived in and what role public transportation played. And as one writer pointed out, it was really a democratizing type of force because the poor people and the rich people would all get on the same train. And so it was it wasn't just public transportation. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, going all the way back to cable cars. When cable cars went downtown, they had to get them to turn around, and so they didn't just go into the loop and back. They had to go into the loop, and then they kind of went around. But it wasn't called the loop back then, of course. There was no elevated train or anything. Some people think that it's called the loop not because of the L trains. Some people think it's called the loop because of the cable cars, because the cable cars had to make a loop. So everybody thinks it's the L train, but it may not be. Okay, let's go back. So, all right, I have a half-trick question for you. Does anybody know if there was ever a elevated or CTA station in my boundaries of Lincoln Central? Yes. And if no, that's okay. If yes, where would it be? Right, which not is north of my area.
It's like in Highland where the tracks pass across from Yandor Hall.
Yeah, so that's
It
very...
looks like there's a truss structure there that's different than the structures
That's a very good guess. So here's Yondorf Hall on the right. There's trains on the left. That's today, but there's no station there. What did it look like in 1948? Oh my gosh, you just see the top of the roof of the station there. And I said it's a half-trick question because this is the borderline of Lincoln Central, and we're on this half. And the station's kind of over there, but the tracks, the platform went over on our half, so we kind of had one. And I looked forever to find a picture of this station, and I could not. There was nowhere could I find a picture of this station. And I called up Graham Garfield, who's the unofficial historian of the CTA. He said he didn't have one. So I looked on the CTA website, and he emailed me back 3 weeks later and said, Bob, I dug into a private collector, and he's got this photograph. And so now if you look up North and Halstead on the CTA website, they now have a picture, and it's that picture. And you notice that in 1948, it still was not Sam Slicker yet. Okay. All right, so there were actually a few other train stations, so let's look at those. So this is a view of North Avenue near Larrabee.
North Avenue, Larrabee.
And if you look, you say, hey, there's a diagonal street there. Well, that's Ogden. It goes way in the distance. There's a station at Larrabee, Ogden. That's not there anymore. As a matter of fact, there used to be one at Willow Street. Yeah, but it was wiped out because they had to build the subway. The red line goes up right to where that station was. And here are a whole bunch of others. There was one at Webster, believe it or not. There was the one at Halstead I mentioned. There was one at Larrabee. The one at Chillerity. So there were a number of CTA stations. All right, public utilities. Nothing. These are the Larrabee Apartments, a senior living facility. But way back when, in 1910,
Looking east.
it was the switching station for the phone company. Originally when you bought a phone, you'd buy two, because that's the only person you could talk to. You put one in your office and one at home, and you call your wife or your husband and say, I'm late, what do you need? But then they got the idea of, operators, and they plug you in, and this was one of the areas where the operators would plug you into the station. This is one of my favorite photographs after this one. This is the Mohawk and Menominee condo buildings. But if you go back to 1916, I love that picture. We could spend hours talking about electricity, but this is the electrical substation at Mohawk Street. So why is there one there? Well, it turns out that the city got all of its electricity from Samuel Insull's Con Edison. And Insull, we could spend a whole day talking about Insull and how he took over the electric industry, basically invented the idea of a monopoly. He used interesting tactics and low pricing and good merchandising and hardball acquisitions and all kinds of things to create a monopoly. He said it just made sense. Of course he did, he owned it. But the city got all of its electricity from Insull and his Con Ed, except for the street lights of the city. And the street lights decided to buy their electricity from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. And they had a dam out in Lockport, and they brought all the electricity in from there for all the street lights. I think it's very appropriate that in this picture there's actually a street light to tell us that that is what they were powering in the substation. And and this is from a glass plate negative. And the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District has thousands and thousands of great photographs, big glass plate negatives that they're putting online of all their work. Pretty amazing. All right, so we spent a lot of time on transportation. A lot of these other ones I'm going to go through very quickly. Churches, you'll be amazed by some of these. So this is some low-cost housing, the Over the Rainbow Association. Yeah, you'll be amazed by this next transformation, right? So watch closely. Yeah, how about that? That used to exist in our area. That is the Belden Avenue Baptist Church, 1888. It could seat over 1,000 worshipers. For 15 years, in the late 1800s, it was actually also served as the Jewish Congregation of Emmanuel. The last I could find it cited anywhere was 1968, the treaty, but I don't know what year it was actually demolished. All right, next we go to, let's go back. So if you notice here, there's nothing along the street except the sidewalk, but guess what? They decided to put up a little drinking fountain for horses alongside the church. Isn't that wonderful? I like the little girl there. Is she wearing her parasol? Well, the whole building looks like it's kind of this limestone-y, almost Frank Lloyd Wright Prairie thing, but I looked to find the architect. I could not find the architect anywhere. Believe me, I looked. So here we have the education building at DePaul. This one too, well, this is right across the street from the Belden Avenue Baptist Church on the other corner. Oh my gosh, it was a Daniel Burnham design church. Well, actually it was a John Wellborn Root design church because Root was really the architect and Burnham was the businessman. But nonetheless, that is a church, and those two churches sat across from each other. This one was less from 1971. This photograph is from 1971. You can actually see, I think they're getting the effects of the tear it down. You can also see this picture was taken by Richard Nickel. I don't know if everybody knows Richard Nickel. Oh yeah, okay. So Richard Nickel was a famous preservationist, photographer, actually went in to photograph or collect some remnants from Louis Sullivan's stock exchange building when it was being torn down. Wasn't supposed to be there. Part of the building collapsed on him, died. Didn't find his body for Teresa how long? 20-something days, right? So this is a very unusual looking church, right? I mean, there's no steeple, it's kind of octagonal. So let's take a look. This is what the church looked like way back when it was built. Now the interesting thing is the design actually called for a huge tower, which in a way I say, thank God, that it wasn't built, so I like it better the way it was. And here are some pictures that Nickel took. Here's where the inside one was being demolished. So look at the round nature of that. That's an unusual looking church. And Root also designed a picture of Burnham into the church. You notice the Paul music right there? That's still here, right? Yeah. All right, so this is one of my lovely photographs of a parking lot. This is the Lincoln Park High School parking lot. And you say, well, why do we have a parking lot, Bob? What was there before when there were churches? This one will amaze you as well. Check this out. Yeah. So you're walking down Armitage, and oh, there's the parking lot. Now imagine walking down 100 years beforehand, and that was there. Look at the beautiful steep. Yeah. 1887 plus $45,000 to build. We'll talk about urban renewal later. It was did not survive the urban renewal. They up and moved and joined up with the Floating Covenant Church and then became Lincoln Park Presbyterian. Knocked down in 1967. So I guess in a way you could say they literally paved paradise. Put up a parking lot, right? Yeah, let that sink in for a while. All right, so this was probably the hardest picture I had to find. Not this one, the one afterwards. But this is Zon Halstead. It's, I don't know, it's 225. It's some rental or condos that are there. But if you go way back when, 1925, there was a huge church there, Wesley Methodist Church. No one ever heard of it. I've never seen it hardly mentioned at all. I mean, I just came across it. And I could find no photographs or barely any internet mentions. Look at the Tribune. Okay, there's a few services there. So luckily, I linked up with actually go back, Barry Smith, who is a historian for the Lincoln Park Presbyterian Church, said, hey, I know somebody in the Wesley Methodists, and he linked me with someone who linked me with someone who got me to the secretary of the Midwest Methodist, and they have an archive at the Garrett Seminary in Evanston, and they dug down and they found this little 2 by 3 inch photograph in 1925 brochure, and that's what quality's not so good. They sent me a photocopy of it. And this is, as far as I know, this is the only remaining photograph of this church. So now we jump over to, Barry also sent me some ideas on Sedgwick, Wisconsin. So here we are, current scene, and this is what it looked like in the 1960s. So now you see what is called the Second Church, the Wisconsin Street Second Church. They actually go all the way back to 1852, not at this site, but the church was built, but it was destroyed by the Chicago fire in 1869. It was destroyed again in 1936 by another fire. I guess they're not praying as much as they should maybe, but eventually, you know, and the interesting things here is you can see there's Ogden Avenue right in front. The other thing is I love the old gas station pumps. Now, if you want to get yourself situated and understand really what it is, here's another picture. Now, Ogden Avenue has been taken out, so we're in 1970. So they haven't put in anything else yet. This is where the, what is it, the Fort Crosses, Church of the Fort Crosses, right? Three Crosses? Yeah, pretty floral. But you still see the church is still there. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about hospitals and what they call welfare institutions. Did we see this building before? Isn't this the DePaul Education Building? Right? This is where that church by Daniel Berman and Ruber. Well, before there was that church, there were a bunch of houses. But these houses were actually the Julia F. Porter established the Maurice Porter for her son, Memorial Hospital, this private house, named after her first son who died when he was only 13 years old. She decided to expand, and so she moved over to Fullerton and Orchard and changed the name to something called Children's Memorial. Yeah, so this is where Children's Memorial started, right there on Fullerton and Halstead. And if you actually go to the education building, you'll see this plaque there that talks about how it's the home of Children's Memorial Hospital. Yeah, so this one wasn't too hard for me to figure out, you know, what was up there. All right, this one will blow you away. So here we are at the corner of Lincoln, Cleveland, and Dickens. So we're looking southeast, obviously. You can see the skyscrapers in the background. There's Carnival Grocery Store over here. Something used to be called the Fort Farthing, but now it's, what's it called now? The Dickens Street Public House, right? So you know what I'm talking about? All right, ready for this one? What it used to look like.
Wow.
Yeah. Anybody know what that is? That's, you know. That's the original Augustana Hospital. Remember we talked about it with that picture of the bus was in the background? So this is where it was originally. So Augustana Hospital, 1881, they just bought a rented house. 1893, they decided to build this. This corner is known as, or was known back then as President's Corner. Anybody know why? Because you had Cleveland was a president, Lincoln was a president, and Dickens was, oh wait, Dickens wasn't a president. It wasn't called Dickens back then, it was called Garfield. He was the president. So he was the president. And so if you go forward into the future, about 1960 or so, we can see it is now the hotel president. And I can find out nothing else about the hotel president. I can't find when it existed or anything else, but, Miller Pharmacy was in this when it was a hospital, and then a guy named Ron bought it out, right? Ron moved across the street, and now he's moving over to Clark Street. All right, so, and back to that damn parking lot by Lehman Park High School again. It's actually the cul-de-sac by Burley. And this, I think, is, the next one is the oldest photograph I have. And it is the Evangelical Orphan Asylum. They called them asylums back then instead of like children's homes and things like that. There was no, this orphanage essentially reopened after the Great Fire destroyed their previous building on Clark Street. It was started by a man named Karl Gottfried Buick, again, very German area at this point in time. And they needed a place to orphanage for orphans. And eventually, I don't know when they knocked it down, but it is, again, not a great photograph, but I think it's the oldest photograph I have. This one is another one that's going to blow you away. So this is the rear of the Dickens and Berlin Apartments. It's the senior living facility, CHA senior living facility. It's right by Oz Park. I'm kind of standing on what some people call the hill, or Dog Hill as we call it, for dog owners. And you know, it's like, okay, well that's kind of interesting, but this is what it looked like. Wow. 1965. St. Joseph Hospital was on this site. Unbelievable.
Oh.
Yeah, so the Great Fire just missed St. Joseph's Hospital. So you can see here in green, it just missed. Two different maps of it. And I found this write-up, contemporaneous write-up at the time of the Great Fire, and it talks about how the it talks about how the fire after reaching Orchard Street, you know, where it went, is along Pearl Butt, which is what Cleveland used to be called, Pearl Butt. It was a developer. So fire proceeded north of the center, which is Armitage Avenue, on which only 3 houses were burned down. That's weird. Why is that? The blocks around me nearly vacant. So at the time of the Great Fire, there wasn't a lot here. So there's some other pictures. There's what it looked like way back when it was first built. I love the flying nuns, right? Sister Patrol. And here they're moving one of the last patients out in 1965. I actually talked with one of my neighbors who's 75 years old. He said, oh yeah, St. Joseph's. I worked there the last 2 years in admitting. So he actually knew about it, but no one else did. This next one, I'm out of time, I gotta go. No, I gotta go faster, sorry. So everybody knows, I think, this big mansion, it's got $50 million, it's available for sale, I hear. Ironically, before it was a mansion, no, it was a half-orphan asylum for poor kids. And it was called, why was it called a half, well, who's a half-orphan? That's like if you lost your dad, not your mom. But your mom had to work and take care of you. And actually, it says up here standard X-ray. I couldn't figure that out. And it turns out that it was actually before that. It was something called the Chicago Nursery and Half Orphan Asylum. And so way back in 1872, it was that, and then they sold it, and it became it became infant welfare. Going the wrong direction. But between there, it turned out to be it was Standard X-ray Company. And here, very close to my house, there's this relatively new building, and this is the back end of it. And this is what it looked like back in 1960. And that's when it was the Standard X-ray Company. They made X-ray machines for 10 years. And then it became, I don't know if anybody remembers infant welfare, right? That's kind of almost modern times. We all remember that, right? So it was infant welfare for a while until they sold all 14 lots, and the back half of Burley became the mansion, and the 7 lots on Halstead became the building I just showed you. All right, now I'm over on Wisconsin. What am I doing on Wisconsin Street? We're talking about hospitals. Why would I be over on Wisconsin Street? Yeah, there we go. All right, so somebody knows. So it was Roosevelt Hospital, which, by the way, they wanted to expand Roosevelt Hospital back in 19-something, and Kenneth Lincoln Central Association sued them to stop.
Oh.
And we sued them 3 times in one time. So.
I represented them in that case.
Thank you very much. Your check was in the mail, I hope. All right, school. So everybody knows Newberry School, right? Well, before Newberry School, it was Newberry School, but it was a different Newberry School. They had an older building. In 1931, they decided to modernize it and create a different Newberry School. And that's just another view of Newberry School. Newberry School was originally built in, what did I say, 1858? There was nothing up here in 1858. They took a, what was it? 1858. Yeah, the photo was taken in 1888. The school was actually built in 1858. They knew the city was expanding north. There weren't a lot of people who lived here, though. So they were building a school based on some speculation. Okay, here, hey, I'm back to that parking lot again. I keep coming back to this parking lot at Lincoln Park High School. And you say, wait, I know there's a school there, but it's a parking lot. Well, before it was Lincoln Park High School, no, it was the Arnold Elementary School. Waller was still there. But this was in the parking lot of Waller High School before. This was an elementary school. And you will notice that Burling Street, hey, it goes through. Doesn't go through anymore. There's that cul-de-sac up here. The other thing that's kind of interesting is there was a little park right here across the street. You know what that park was called? Fowler Park.
Oh.
It's not Eddie Fowler. Fowler Park. Now, we already have a Fowler Park. So where did this Fowler Park come? Well, when this Fowler Park closed, we decided, I don't know why we keep naming parks after Fowler, but as Michelle, maybe we'll change that. We'll talk about it. And there's burning down. Apparently some kids decided to have a little bonfire and it burned down. Apparently there were 2,000 or 3,000 people watching it burn down on a very cold February night. All right, well here's Waller High School, or now called Lincoln Park High School. And then this is 2016. 116 years earlier, you know what it looked like? It looked like the same damn thing. Except the extension is not built yet. Right? The other thing you'll notice is, hey, look, Orchard Street goes through. It's like Curly goes all the way through here. How about that? Hey, here's my dog Riley. Sorry, Dice wasn't in the picture, Joe. She was running around somewhere. So this is why we call it dog hill because dogs run around there. And this one will blow you away. So if you go back to after our school burned down, this is what it looked like. Now, there's a couple of amazing things. One is the church is still there, see? And let's go back a second, just to convince you I'm in the right place. So there's the high school. Keep your eye on the high school as we transition. Yeah, I didn't lie. It's really the right place. Now, the interesting thing was, I thought, why is there a hill in flat Chicago? Yeah, why is there a hill in flat Chicago? I always thought that, there were a bunch of buildings where Oz Park is. They knocked them down and they threw them in there. But that was in 1970. The photograph here is 1961. So obviously what they did was, after Arnold School burned down and they built the extension to Lincoln Park High School, they had to excavate all this dirt. Where'd they put it? Right next to it. And they put grass seed on top. So it doesn't have anything to do with Oz Park. It has to do with tearing down Arnold School and building the extension. Some photographs from the yearbooks. I spent a good 3 or 4 hours with the nice folks at Lincoln Park High School, going through all these pictures. You can see, again, Orchard Street, going through. My favorite is, hey, they have a rifle range in the basement. What school wouldn't be complete without a rifle? Right, nowadays, I'm sure, of course you want those. View from the top. Yeah. All right, so I told you about the German Broadway. Larrabee and North Avenue. What did it look like 100 years earlier? It looks a lot different. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of this. And you'll notice, you can't make out, but this is Jandorf. You say, well, wait a second, Bob, you're in Larrabee North. Jandorf building's over on North and Halstead. This isn't Jandorf Block and Hall. This is their store where they sold clothing. They had 3 clothing stores, and they made a lot of money. Jandorf family, a very well-to-do Jewish-German family, made a lot of money in the clothing industry, decided to build Jandorf Block as a social club, which we'll talk about later. So let's talk about the German Broadway. It's called German Broadway because there was a lot of German theater along North Avenue. So there was the Clybourne Theater, there was the Orchard Theater. Orchard Theater, here's a advertisement. They're talking about the Kino. The Orchard Theater changed names to the Kino. They talk about Ton films, that means sound films. And they talk about the Navy captain, that's the movie playing. Here's another one, Leidenschaft, which means passion. That kind of means more like no pain, no gain, but so like if you have passion, you have to give something up in order to have passion, or something like that. I don't know, Germans have these great words, so it's about 3 sentences in 1 word. So that was the Kino. Then we had the Janet or Jeanette Theater, and there's an actual picture of this was not easy to find. This was buried in some book I found. The Jeanette Theater. Yeah. The Ideal Theater, which really confused me, like was it built in 1905 or 1914? What address was it at? Was it 150 seats? I kept getting like different views of this. Now, I know there was a theater. This is the picture we saw originally in North Avenue, and I zoomed in. It sure looks like Ideal Theater, and it's at 1905. But then I think what happened is, and I know from the fire maps, it says 5-cent theater at 1917. Excuse me, it's 1617. Sorry, it's at 1617. There it is at 1617. I think they moved across the street. So I think that explains that. Then we get the Mohawk Theater. And then we get the Plaza Theater. Plaza Theater kind of ran into some hard times, and by the end of it, there's the Plaza Theater. And by the end of times, it was showing some interesting films. Actually, so you used to show films with like their playmates live playmates introducing the films, and one of them in the 60s actually decided to go to North Avenue Beach and pose topless for promotion, and almost got arrested. So interesting. So that's the German Broadway. Now we've got a lot of other interesting North Avenue pictures. North Avenue changed dramatically. This is North Avenue today because of urban renewal, which we'll talk about. And so at North Avenue in Larrabee, they widened the street as part of urban renewal, but before they did that, it looked like this. Yeah, wow. So it looked like Armitage or Fullerton. It looked like a busy street. It was narrower. They did all kinds of retail there. It was the retail hub of the North Side. Very German-oriented, but people came there no matter what. And these pillars here were part of their merchandising efforts. And there's Yondorf again, right there at the corner. But look how busy that street is compared to that. Yeah, I'm sorry if anybody lives there, but compared to that. See, interesting buildings, but just a lot to buy. All right, this is, again, North Avenue in Larrabee. Yondorf again, why are you showing us another picture of that? Because of this building. This was a police substation on the corner. It actually served as a fire station too, because you can see the little house where the fire, or the little door where the fire came out. The interesting thing about this police station is, everybody knows about the Haymarket event, right? The Haymarket riots, right? So the Haymarket riots, everybody knows about, they don't know the Haymarket riots, but what actually were they rioting about? You know, it's going like, yeah, well, it was about, what were they rioting about? So, yeah, so it was a big labor issue. It was basically a protest, a peaceful protest for like an 8-hour day. And what happened was, it was basically over, very peaceful, and then late at night, it was just winding down, someone threw a bomb. Now, whether it was the anarchists, you know, who threw the bomb, whether it was agent provocateur trying to get the anarchists or the workers in trouble, nobody really knows. 7 people were arrested, several were prosecuted, several were then exonerated. It was not exactly a shining moment of great justice. But one of the witnesses, what's that? One was hung, one killed himself, and the last one escaped to Germany, and the rest were actually let go.
Was that like 1869?
Was that 88? Yeah. And but it turns out that according to one of the accused, he said that they went to this police station during the riots, and they were going to throw a bomb at the policemen as they were coming out of this police station, and there were 2 of them, and the guy lighting the match chickened out and pretended he couldn't get it lit, and a police van went by before they could throw the bomb. Right there in our neighborhood. As a matter of fact, a lot of the protesters were German, and they were from our neighborhood up here in Lincoln Park. A lot of different activities related to Haymarket around North Avenue, Larrabee, Clybourne. Another picture of North Avenue. I love this one. It was the North Avenue State Bank, which was a mainstay of the neighborhoods. You can also see the optician. I love this eye up here. It's kind of like in The Great Gatsby. But it turns out there's a relationship. These eyes were very commonly used by opticians around the country. It was a symbol. You knew there was an optician. So, just another picture. Wow, look what North Avenue used to look like. I tried to get up on the roof of this building and didn't shoot that one, but couldn't get up there. Everybody like Brock's candy? Yeah, well, Emil Brock started on North Avenue. And there is Emil right there, waving at you, saying, hey, why go downtown? Get it here for less, 25% less. And he was located at the corner of North and Town Court. Oh wait, where's Town Court? And it's not here anymore, but it's Town Court right there. And Orchard Street goes through. Remember those old pictures I showed you? All right, towers of the go through quickly. Yeah, well, I don't know. There's actually not a lot of information about most of these taverns, so I don't have a lot to say about them. But up there in Halstead, almost at the corner of Lincoln and Fullerton, it looks like this now. It's part of the Lincoln Common redevelopment, but it used to be Joseph Kohler's Lake Peerage Stage. And you'll notice on this side, it's in German. Joseph Kohler's Beer Hall. This side, Joe Kohler's Beer Hall. Hey, he knows his market. What can you say? Here we are in Larrabee. Does anybody live here at 19? No, close? No, that's right. I knew you were near this. Well, that's what it used to look like. Joe Rottinger's. I would not want to mess around in this tavern. This guy looks a little tough. Those dogs are a little tough. But what really scared me is I would not have to want to do it. All right, hey, we're back to Newberry School. Why are we back to Newberry School? Well, you know, Edward Collins, the assistant principal, sent me this next picture of the school saying, hey, I found another picture of the school. It's not very good quality. It's kind of a low-grade photocopy. And there it is back there. But what interested me is there's a tavern right up here, and it's Julian's. And I'm thinking, wait. Lincoln Central and Ranch Triangle, we did a lot of work to save, you know where the Black Duck building is, or now it's the Willow Room? They were going to maybe tear down that building. So Lincoln Central Association, Ranch Triangle, we worked hard to save that building, and we found out it was Joseph Julian's and his son Matt, and they did magic there. There's a whole magic history, and that was part of it. So why is Joseph Julian's 2 blocks over on Burling Street? Well, I actually got in touch with the Julian family, and they got me in touch with a biographer, and it turns out that Joseph Julian used to work for Schlitz, and you can see here, he's selling Schlitz up there in the sign right there. It turns out that he had several taverns, and he, this was the one he had before the one on Halstead Street that we all know, which is now the Willow Room. He had several, right? He had several. Well, the one on Irving is where he moved after Halstead Street. So that was much later, like the 50s. So here we are now just on Larrabee, and there's another example of Marty's Inn, Marty's AG Club. Here's, looks like an alley. This is where the Ogden Court used to be, but it's an alley, it's just off Lincoln. Oh, I am serious with that. But it looked a little bit different back in the 60s. Hey, how could there be this big tavern in an alley? And the answer is because Ogden Avenue used to go through there. So Ogden Avenue changed a lot of things. So, Fran, should I keep going? I mean, yes. Okay. Let's still moving along here. Hey, there's our favorite pasta palazzo. We all love pasta palazzo, right? So what used to be there before pasta palazzo?
What?
The J&J Tap.
What?
And so, it's kind of a blurry picture of the J&J Tap. And yeah, it says, somebody just noticed it. There's several things going on with this picture. One is, the Geppert's is on the wrong side. They moved like 25 years ago. The other thing is, notice took the picture, Richard Dickel. Why is Richard Dickel taking a picture here? Well, it turns out I was down in the belly of the Ryerson Library in the Art Institute to find that picture of the mansion that turned into, or the infant welfare that turned into the mansion. And I'm looking through some notebook with his pictures. Apparently when he was taking pictures there, he decided to walk back to the L to go home, and he saw this interesting building, because it does have some interesting scroll work on it here. And he must have decided to fire off one shot at this building, because it wasn't being torn down or anything. So it's a random shot by Richard Dickel, who knew? But it was a tavern, so I liked it. So here we are on, this is historic. So we're on Larrabee. Does anybody know what tavern this is going to turn into? Yeah, the Taproot Pub. There we go. Now this is the original Taproot Pub, because as many of you are way too young to have gone here, I'm sure there are maybe one or two. Has anybody actually been to this one? Oh, five people. It's good. But
Bumper sticker that says help save the town.
I can't tell you how long I looked for a copy of that bumper sticker. I looked in DePaul, I looked in the History Museum. I was definitely going to put that bumper sticker up. I could not find one. Yeah, I go to junkyard and find one. So the interesting thing is the Taproot Pub was closed as part of urban renewal. And the owner just refused to give in to eminent domain. And let's see how I do this here. The police are breaking down the door. They get in and serve him with papers. And there they go. And they got him. And that was the end of the Taproot Pub. And they moved over to Willow Street, and that's where I spent a few hours drinking beers, but that was their other location, and now it's a very nice big home. Social clubs, so if you think back to the early 1900s, I guess they didn't have the internet back then. They didn't have TV, they didn't have radio, they didn't have a lot of things. So as Alexis de Tocqueville noted, it was a nation of joiners. People joined clubs. And so here we are on Larrabee, and you can just barely make out Koch or Koch Hall, K-O-C-H. The interesting thing, it was owned by Fritz Koch. It was a German social club, as most were. The interesting thing was his son Fred took it over. Fred was a football player at Lane Tech, at the original Lane Tech location. He swam at the Larrabee YMCA and trained with Johnny Weissmuller there. He became Tarzan. He was an amateur wrestler. They even had wrestling competitions here, and he eventually became head of the Wrestling Federation. So interesting background on Larrabee there. Here we are, Webster looking into